The ballroom of the Sterling Rosewood Hotel glowed beneath a massive crystal chandelier that scattered light across the polished marble floors. Guests in glittering gowns and tailored suits filled the air with laughter and music, a celebration of love and wealth at its height. At the center of it all stood Clara Whitmore, 26, radiant in her emerald silk gown, her heart pounding as her eyes locked on the man who had changed her life forever. Alexander Hartwell, 32, commanded the room in a midnight blue Armani suit. His towering frame and dark eyes drew admiration from every corner, but his gaze never left Clara. He was more than a wealthy businessman who owned the city's most prestigious vintage car dealership and insurance empire. Tonight he was a man, in love, devoted entirely to the woman before him. "You're staring again," whispered Sophie Green, Clara's lifelong best friend, smiling knowingly. "The way he looks at you should be illegal. Every woman here envies you." Clara flushed as Alexander crossed the ballroom with effortless confidence. He slid his arms gently around her waist and whispered, "My queen, you look breathtaking." "In 3 weeks, you'll be my wife." Clara leaned into him, her smile glowing. "It feels like a dream, Alexander, like all of this can't be real." He cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her cheeks with reverence. "If this is a dream, I'll never wake up. You are my reality, my future, my everything." The orchestra began playing At Last by Etta James, and Alexander guided Clara onto the dance floor. Swaying under the chandelier's glow, she felt like a princess living a fairy tale. Raised in a modest apartment by her hard-working mother, Margaret Whitmore, who had spent years waiting tables at a diner to keep them afloat, Clara never imagined she would be here, wrapped in the arms of a man who made her feel cherished beyond measure. "Tell me again how we met," she whispered as her head rested against his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. Alexander chuckled. "You were arguing with an adjuster about your car accident claim. You wore a yellow sundress with tiny flowers, and you were so passionate that I forgot to breathe. I left an important meeting just to help you." Clara laughed softly. "Your secretary thought you'd lost your mind." He smiled and spun her gently. "I had lost my mind the moment I saw you. I had everything, but it meant nothing until you filled my soul with light." Across the room, Margaret watched with a smile that failed to reach her eyes. At 48, she looked glamorous in an elegant gown, her beauty carefully preserved, but behind the glass of champagne in her hand, a darker thought simmered. "Your daughter is blessed," said Mrs. Wellington, a society matron. "Alexander is devoted, handsome, and wealthy." Margaret's reply carried an edge hidden in politeness. "Clara has always been very lucky." Later in the evening, Alexander surprised Clara with a video montage of their love story. Their first date at the vintage car show where he bought her a Thunderbird charm bracelet, their romantic Napa Valley weekend where he proposed, and countless tender moments. Guests applauded warmly as Alexander took the microphone. 18 months ago I thought I understood love," he said, his voice steady and strong. "I was wrong. Love is not wealth or passion alone. It is finding someone who sees your soul and chooses to stay. Clara loved me for the man beneath the fortune, and she taught me that the most valuable thing I have is her heart." Applause thundered across the ballroom as Alexander kissed Clara with such devotion that flashbulbs lit the moment for magazines to crown it the romance of the year. "I love you beyond reason, Clara Whitmore," he whispered. "In 3 weeks you'll be my wife, and I will spend the rest of my life proving I deserve you." Tears shone in her eyes as she replied, "I love you too. You've given me a fairy tale I never dared to dream." The celebration wound down and Margaret approached with champagne. To the happy couple, she toasted sweetly. "May your love story be everything you dream." Alexander raised his glass. "Thank you, Margaret. Clara is lucky to have a supportive mother." Her smile sharpened almost imperceptibly. "I'll make sure she gets exactly what she deserves." Clara embraced her mother with full trust, blind to the poison behind her words. Later on the hotel balcony overlooking the glittering city lights, Alexander held Clara close. 3 weeks, he murmured. Forever, she whispered back, her heart soaring. But inside, Margaret lingered in the ballroom shadows, her glass clenched tight, her mind already working on the plan that would turn Clara's dream into a nightmare. The morning of the wedding dawned golden and flawless, the kind of day poets would have compared to heaven's own blessing. The towering spires of St. Augustine's Cathedral pierced the dawn sky, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows that painted shimmering patterns across the marble floor. 10,000 white roses filled the air with fragrance, and ribbons of silk tied to every pew gave the cathedral an ethereal glow. In the bridal suite, Clara Whitmore stood before a circle of mirrors, her reflection showing beauty so radiant it seemed otherworldly. Her gown was a masterpiece designed by Italian couturier Giuseppe Romano, a creation of silk embroidered with hand-sewn diamonds that caught the light like falling stars. The fitted bodice framed her graceful figure, and the cathedral train behind her drifted like morning mist. Atop her dark hair, styled in flowing waves, rested a diamond tiara that had once belonged to Alexander's grandmother. "You look like an angel descended from heaven," whispered Sophie Green, her best friend and maid of honor, as she adjusted the veil with trembling hands. Even the makeup artist, after finishing Clara's glowing look, wiped tears from her eyes. "In 20 years I have never seen a bride radiate like this," she said softly. Clara's hand moved to the diamond necklace Alexander had given her the night before, a vintage piece from 1920. He had told her it was made the year his great-grandparents were married, and they had spent 73 years together. "He wants our love to last even longer," Clara whispered, smiling at the thought. Meanwhile, in the cathedral below, the pews were filling with 300 distinguished guests. Collectors of Alexander's rare automobiles mingled with insurance, magnates and socialites, while celebrities and politicians took their seats, buzzing about the wedding of the year. The aisle glowed under flickering golden candles, and cascades of white orchids and roses framed the altar, chosen by Alexander himself because they were Clara's favorite. At the altar, Alexander Hartwell stood tall in a custom Italian tuxedo, platinum cufflinks at his wrists and a platinum tie clip bearing both their initials. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jaw clean-shaven, but his hands trembled, not from doubt, but from anticipation. His best man, James Donovan, leaned closer. "You ready for this? You look like you're about to explode." Alexander smiled faintly. "I've been ready since the day I met her. Clara is my everything. My heart, my soul, my reason for living. I can't wait to call her my wife." In a separate room, Clara's mother, Margaret Whitmore, adjusted her navy blue gown in front of the mirror. The dress was a gift from Alexander, chosen for its elegance, and her hair was swept into a flawless updo. Yet her eyes gleamed with an intensity that betrayed the polished image she wore. "You look stunning, Margaret," said Clara's Aunt Rebecca, entering with a warm smile. "Clara is so lucky to have a mother as graceful and supportive as you, walking her into this new life." Margaret smiled, her reflection cold beneath the gloss. "Yes. Lucky. She has always been very lucky." Rebecca's expression flickered with concern. "Are you all right? You seem tense." Margaret turned with practiced charm, masking her true thoughts. "I'm perfect. I'm just emotional about giving away my little girl to such a wonderful man. Alexander is everything a mother could want for her daughter. Handsome, successful, devoted." Rebecca nodded warmly. "The way he looks at Clara, it's as though she hung the moon and stars." Margaret's reply was soft, yet carried a note of bitterness. "Yes, he certainly knows how to appreciate beauty." In the cathedral, the orchestra tuned their instruments, while the guests hushed in anticipation. The organ's processional thundered as 6 flower girls in white dresses scattered petals down the aisle, followed by 8 bridesmaids in lavender gowns. The entire congregation rose, the air vibrating with excitement as golden sunlight poured through the stained glass, creating a pathway of rainbow light down the aisle. Alexander's heart pounded with such force, he thought the whole cathedral must hear it. "This is it," James whispered at his side. "Your queen is about to appear." The massive cathedral doors opened, and every guest leaned forward, ready to witness the bride who would become the centerpiece of a love story destined to be remembered for generations. But in the bridal suite, Sophie had just pulled Clara aside, her face pale, her hands shaking as though she carried the weight of a deadly secret. "Clara," Sophie whispered urgently, her voice trembling. "I need to tell you something before you walk down that aisle. Something about Alexander and your mother." Clara's smile faltered, confusion flashing in her eyes. The orchestra's music swelled through the cathedral, but the words from her best friend hit her like ice water. The fairy tale shimmer of the day began to crack, and the dream she thought was hers wavered on the edge of nightmare. Inside the bridal suite, time seemed to freeze. Sophie's hands trembled as she clutched Clara's bouquet tighter. Her eyes filled with panic, and her voice broke as she whispered the secret that would change everything. "Clara, I overheard your mother this morning. She was on the phone laughing about what happened at the engagement party. She said she slept with Alexander in the garden 3 weeks ago." Clara's breath caught in her throat, her knees buckling as though the ground had vanished beneath her. She gripped the vanity table to steady herself, her diamond tiara slipping slightly as her reflection in the mirror blurred with disbelief. "That's not possible," she whispered, her voice sharp and shaking. "You must have misunderstood. My mother would never, Alexander would never. We're getting married in 10 minutes. Sophie's eyes brimmed with tears. "I swear, I heard her clearly. She said it was deliberate. She planned everything to destroy your happiness. She wanted to teach you a lesson about trusting people too easily." The words pierced Clara's chest like daggers. She stared at herself in the mirror, her perfect makeup unable to hide the devastation spreading across her face. "Planned?" she repeated hollowly. "She planned to seduce my fiancé?" "Yes," Sophie said with a trembling nod. "She said you didn't deserve a fairy tale when she never had one herself. It wasn't about Alexander. It was about you. She wanted to ruin your wedding day." Clara's eyes filled with a storm of emotions: shock, grief, betrayal, and a rising fire that began to burn through her despair. "She wanted to humiliate me," she said, her voice growing stronger with every word. "She wanted to see me broken." Sophie's voice shook as she asked, "What are you going to do?" Clara straightened her tiara, lifted her chin, and smoothed her gown. The shattered bride in the mirror was gone. In her place stood a woman of steel. "If my mother wants humiliation, then I'll give it to her, but it won't be mine." "Clara, what do you mean?" Sophie gasped. Clara's expression hardened, her eyes fierce with determination. "I'll give them all a wedding they'll never forget." Down in the cathedral, Alexander stood waiting at the altar, checking his watch. Clara was 5 minutes late, but he smiled to himself. For her, he would wait forever. He had no idea his moment of weakness 3 weeks earlier was about to detonate, in front of 300 guests. The massive cathedral doors opened, and the congregation rose to their feet as Clara appeared in the doorway. She walked down the aisle with a radiant smile that masked the storm raging inside her. Alexander's breath caught as he watched her, his heart swelling with love so fierce it blinded him to the judgment that was about to fall. Father Michael's voice echoed through the cathedral. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Alexander Hartwell and Clara Whitmore in holy matrimony." Alexander's eyes never left Clara's face, drinking in her beauty with pure adoration. He believed he was moments away from forever. Then Father Michael continued, "If anyone knows of any reason why these two should not be joined, speak now or forever hold your peace." The cathedral hushed, waiting for the silence that always followed. Instead, Clara stepped forward. Her smile remained dazzling, but her voice rang out strong and clear, carrying through the sacred space. "Actually, Father Michael," she said, her eyes sweeping across the congregation, "before we exchange vows, I think our guests deserve to know the truth about my groom and my mother." A ripple of shocked murmurs surged through the guests. Alexander's smile faltered, confusion clouding his expression. His pulse raced as dread filled his chest. 3 weeks ago, at our engagement party, Clara announced, her voice unwavering, While I was preparing for photographs, my fiancé shared an intimate encounter with my mother in the garden. The cathedral exploded with gasps, dropped programs, and frantic whispers. Reporters raised cameras, flashes popping like fireworks as the scandal of the decade unfolded before their eyes. Alexander's face drained of color. He tried to speak but could only stammer. "Clara, please let me explain." "Oh, there's more?" Clara cut in, her tone sharp as a blade. "This was no mistake. My mother planned the seduction to destroy my happiness. She wanted to ruin this day because she couldn't stand to see me happy." Gasps echoed again, the congregation reeling from the revelation. Clara lifted her hand and slowly slid the diamond engagement ring from her finger. She held it up high, for every guest to see before placing it deliberately on the marble altar beside the unity candles. "The wedding is over," she declared firmly, "but the show my mother wanted is just beginning." Alexander collapsed to his knees on the marble floor, his expensive tuxedo wrinkling as he reached for Clara. "Please, my love, don't do this. I was weak. I was manipulated." But Clara turned away, her train flowing like silk flames behind her as she walked down the aisle with her head held high. 300 witnesses stared in stunned silence as the groom crumbled and the bride delivered the perfect act of revenge. Margaret's plan to humiliate her daughter had backfired. Instead, Clara had burned Alexander in front of the entire world and walked away triumphant. But no one in that cathedral knew the crueler storm Margaret had yet to unleash. The cathedral echoed with Clara's footsteps as she marched toward the doors, her gown trailing behind her like a banner of defiance. 300 guests whispered, in shock, their voices buzzing like a storm. Alexander remained kneeling at the altar, shattered by the woman he loved. But before Clara could escape the wreckage, a scream cut through the air. "How dare you expose me?" Every head turned as Margaret Whitmore rose from her front row pew. Her elegant facade cracked apart, the flawless navy gown and polished hair unable to hide the venom in her expression. She stormed into the aisle, her heels clicking against marble like gunfire, her fury radiating so fiercely it silenced the congregation. Clara froze, turning slowly to face her mother. The woman who had raised her alone no longer wore the mask of charm. Margaret's face twisted into something almost unrecognizable, a sneer that revealed the monster lurking beneath the motherly smile. "You ungrateful little brat," Margaret spat, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You think you can humiliate me in front of all these people? You think you can ruin my perfect plan with your dramatic scene?" The audience gasped as they realized this confrontation was no misunderstanding, but a war exploding between mother and daughter. Phones rose into the air, recording every second of what was becoming the scandal of the century. Clara's voice trembled, then steadied. "Your perfect plan was to destroy my wedding day. You seduced Alexander just to hurt me." Margaret laughed, the sound cruel and manic, echoing through the cathedral like broken bells. "Of course I did. Did you think I would smile and clap while you lived like a princess? Did you think I would watch you get everything I was denied?" Father Michael stepped forward cautiously, his hands raised. "Please, this is not the place." Margaret cut him off with a glare that could shatter stone. "No, Father. Everyone here needs to know the truth about this spoiled child. They need to know why she doesn't deserve her fairy tale." Alexander pushed himself to his feet, horror dawning as he finally understood Margaret's true nature. "You planned everything. You used me to hurt your own daughter. What kind of mother does that?" Margaret's voice rose, her bitterness boiling over. "The kind who spent 26 years watching an unwanted child take opportunities I never had. The kind who sacrificed everything and got nothing in return. You were just a tool, Alexander. I used your weakness to prove to Clara that she isn't special enough for happy endings." Gasps filled the cathedral. Guests leaned forward, horrified. This wasn't jealousy or scandal. It was pure malice laid bare. Clara's voice shook, but carried strength. "You used him to hurt me because you're jealous of my happiness." "Jealous?" Margaret screamed, her voice so sharp that some guests flinched. "I'm not jealous. I'm realistic. Men like Alexander don't love girls, like us. We're not fairy tale princesses. We're burdens. And I wanted you to learn that truth the hard way. Tears welled in Clara's eyes, but her spine stiffened. You destroyed my day because you couldn't stand to see me loved. Margaret's lips curled into a triumphant smile, and since you insisted on humiliating me in public, let me return the favor. Let me tell everyone who you really are. Clara's stomach dropped as dread filled her. She knew that look in her mother's eyes. It was the same look Margaret had when delivering punishments in childhood. You're not the special girl I pretended you were, Margaret declared to the congregation. You're the result of one stupid night when I was 17. Your father was just a boy who abandoned me the moment I told him I was pregnant. I told people you were adopted to make you seem special, but the truth is, you were my burden from the day you were born. The revelation detonated like a bomb. Gasps erupted. Whispers spread like fire, and Clara collapsed to her knees in the aisle as her tiara slipped and scattered across the marble floor. Her entire identity shattered in front of hundreds of witnesses. Margaret's voice grew louder, feeding on the horror around her. I gave up my teenage years, my beauty, my chances at real love, all for her. And how does she repay me? By trying to live like a princess while I suffered. She resented nothing. I resented everything. The guests cried out in disbelief and disgust. Some women wept openly. Men shook their heads in outrage. The elegant celebration had transformed into a courtroom, and Margaret was exposing her own soul to judgment. Clara's whisper rose from the marble floor, her voice fragile yet piercing. You resented every sacrifice, every moment, every part of raising me. Yes, Margaret shouted, her mask gone. Every single second, every dollar I spent, every night I stayed awake, every piece of my youth I lost. I hated it. I hated watching you grow beautiful and hopeful while I grew bitter and trapped. The cathedral broke into chaos. Guests shouted angrily, denouncing Margaret's cruelty. Phones continued to record, knowing the world was about to see a mother's mask ripped off for good. Clara slowly pushed herself to her feet, her gown torn and her face streaked with tears. But in her eyes now burned a strength her mother had never expected. You didn't teach me about men, Mother. You taught me about you. You showed me that some people are so broken that they destroy everyone around them. You didn't raise me out of love. You used me as a weapon for your misery. The crowd erupted in murmurs of agreement. Margaret looked around, suddenly realizing that the faces staring back at her no longer admired her. They despised her. Her plan for dominance had turned into her own destruction. I did everything for you, she cried one last time, her voice cracking. No, Clara replied with a steady voice that carried through the cathedral. You did everything to me, and there is a difference. Margaret's face twisted with rage and fear as she grabbed her purse and forced her way toward the exit. But instead of leaving with triumph, she fled like an exposed predator, despised and disgraced. Clara stood in the ruins of her wedding, surrounded by broken roses and shattered dreams. For the first time in her life, she felt free of her mother's chains. Alexander knelt at the altar, his head buried in his hands, realizing he had been nothing more than a pawn in Margaret's war. The wedding was destroyed. The truth was out. And though both Clara and Alexander were broken, a new story was beginning. One forged not from perfection, but from fire, pain, and the strength to rise again. The cathedral slowly emptied as guests filed out in shocked clusters, their voices buzzing with disbelief over the scandal they had just witnessed. But Alexander Hartwell did not move from the altar. His tuxedo was wrinkled, his hands clutched his face, and the diamond engagement ring Clara had left behind glittered on the marble steps like a cruel reminder of everything he had lost. Alexander, whispered James Donovan, kneeling beside him, you need to leave. Reporters are waiting outside and social media is already exploding with videos. Alexander lifted his head, his eyes red and hollow. She's gone, James. The love of my life is gone, and I was too weak to protect her. James tried to reason with him. You were manipulated by a cruel woman. Margaret planned everything. You were a victim too. Alexander's eyes blazed with self-hatred. A victim? No. I'm a grown man who built an empire from nothing, and I let her seduce me, because she fed my insecurities. I wasn't a victim. I was a fool who became a weapon against the woman I love. Meanwhile, Clara Whitmore had fled to the home of her Aunt Rebecca in the suburbs. Still in her torn wedding dress, she collapsed onto the familiar couch where she had once spent childhood afternoons reading fairy tales. Rebecca wrapped her arms around her and held her close as Clara sobbed uncontrollably. I don't understand, Clara cried. How could my own mother do this to me? How could Alexander be weak enough to fall for it? Rebecca stroked her hair gently. Some people are so damaged by their own pain that they spread it like poison. Your mother has always been bitter, Clara. Today she finally showed her true face. As for Alexander, he was manipulated. That doesn't excuse his weakness, but it explains it. A short while later, Clara's cousin Maria, a 30-year-old lawyer, arrived after seeing the viral videos. She hugged Clara fiercely, her voice sharp with anger. That woman finally exposed her true self. But you need to understand something. Alexander was played by a master manipulator. That doesn't erase what he did, but it matters. Clara's voice shook as she looked at her aunt and cousin. Everyone keeps saying he was manipulated, but he still made the choice to betray me, Maria answered firmly. Yes, he made a choice, but it was in a moment of weakness carefully orchestrated by someone who studied his fears. Your mother knew exactly which buttons to press to break both of you. Clara wiped her tears, her heart torn between anger and sorrow. So what do I do now? Rebecca's voice was steady. You heal. You focus on yourself. What happened today says nothing about your worth. It says everything about their brokenness. Across the city, Alexander sat alone in his mansion. Every room felt like a tomb haunted by Clara's laughter and love. The kitchen where she had made breakfast while humming off-key, the library where she had read poetry aloud, the garden where Margaret had seduced him while Clara trusted them, both inside. Each memory stabbed like a blade. He opened his laptop and began to type, pouring his heart into a letter. My dearest Clara, I know I don't deserve to write these words. I was weak, insecure, and I let your mother manipulate me into the worst mistake of my life. I became the weapon she used to destroy you, and I hate myself for it. I replay that night 1,000 times, wishing I could go back and stop myself, but I can't. You trusted me to protect your heart, and instead I gave it to your enemy. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I will spend the rest of my life trying to become worthy of the love you gave me. Forever yours, even if you can never be mine, Alexander. When he finished, tears blurred the screen. He closed the laptop, but the torment did not fade. The next morning, his phone buzzed relentlessly with calls from associates, reporters, and so-called friends. The world mocked him, the millionaire who had been seduced by his fiancée's mother. At the prestigious country club, his rivals laughed behind his back. Did you hear? Hartwell got played like a child, one man jeered. His reputation is finished, another declared. But Alexander wasn't there to defend himself. He was at his dealership, liquidating his prized collection of vintage cars. Each sale cut away a piece of his identity, yet he signed the papers with cold precision. Sir, are you sure about selling the Shelby Cobra? Asked his sales manager, shocked. You turned down millions for it. Sell everything, Alexander replied hollowly. Donate the money to orphanages and women's shelters. Maybe some good can come from my failure. Later that afternoon, as he left the bank after another liquidation, fate intervened. He collided with someone on the sidewalk, scattering grocery bags across the pavement. He knelt immediately to help, then froze when he saw the face he had been dreaming of. Clara. She stared at him in shock, her eyes wide and shimmering with emotions she fought to contain. For a moment, the city noise faded, and it was just them, surrounded by fallen apples and shattered memories. Are you hurt? Alexander asked quickly, his voice breaking as he tried not to touch her. I'm fine, Clara answered sharply, but her voice trembled. She watched as he carefully placed her groceries back into the bag, his hands gentle, his eyes full of torment. When they stood, the world around them rushed back. Shoppers flowed past, some recognizing the infamous couple from the scandal. Alexander's voice was barely a whisper. "Clara, don't." She cut him off, her tone sharp but unsteady. Seeing him so broken stirred something painful inside her. He swallowed hard, his voice raw. "I understand what your mother did. She targeted me because I was weak, but you were her true victim. I am sorry I became the weapon she used to hurt you." Before Clara could reply, her phone rang loudly. Grateful for the excuse, she clutched her bag and hurried away, leaving Alexander standing alone on the sidewalk, watching her disappear into the crowd with the expression of a man watching his soul slip out of reach. Neither of them noticed the dark sedan parked across the street, where Margaret sat with a cruel smile, pleased that her destruction was still unfolding exactly as she planned. 3 weeks passed since the ruined wedding, and Clara Whitmore convinced herself that in a city of 2 million people, she could easily avoid crossing paths with Alexander Hartwell again. She was wrong. Fate had other plans. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Clara pushed a cart through the produce section of Morrison's grocery. Her silk scarf hid her hair, oversized sunglasses covered her eyes, and she kept her head low, desperate to escape the curious stares that had followed her since the scandal. She reached for a bag of apples when another cart slammed into hers, sending oranges rolling across the polished floor. She looked up, ready to apologize, and froze. Alexander stood before her. His once flawless appearance was gone, replaced by rumpled clothes, unshaven stubble, and eyes full of devastation. The sight hit Clara like a physical blow. "Clara," he whispered, her name breaking from his lips like a prayer. Her grip tightened on the cart handle. "Don't," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Don't say my name like that." "I can't help it," Alexander said, his voice rough. "You're the only prayer I know anymore." Other shoppers noticed the tension. Some whispered, recognizing the couple from the viral wedding scandal. Phones began recording. Clara's face burned with humiliation. "People are staring," she said sharply. "Let them stare," Alexander answered, stepping closer even with the shopping carts between them. "Just give me 5 minutes to explain what really happened that night." "Explain?" Clara's voice rose, sharp enough to turn heads. "You want to explain how you slept with my mother, how you betrayed me in front of the world?" "I never planned any of it," Alexander said desperately. "She manipulated me when I was vulnerable and drunk. I was terrified I wasn't good enough for you, and she used that fear against me." Clara's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "You were terrified of not being good enough, so you proved it by betraying me with the one person who raised me. That's your explanation?" His chest heaved, every word like a wound. "I know how it sounds. I know I destroyed everything. But I love you more than my own life. That night meant nothing. You are everything." "Stop," Clara said, her voice breaking as she pulled back. "Love doesn't do what you did. Love doesn't destroy the person it claims to cherish." She abandoned her cart and hurried out of the store, leaving Alexander standing alone among spilled oranges and curious stares. He didn't follow her. Instead, he knelt on the floor, picking up the fallen fruit with trembling hands, tears running freely down his face. The man who once ruled with wealth and power was reduced to a broken figure, cleaning up the mess of a shattered life. 2 days later, Clara visited First National Bank during her lunch break to close the joint savings account she had once shared with Alexander. As she rehearsed her words in line, a voice behind her made her heart stop. "I'd like to make a donation to the Sunshine Orphanage," Alexander told the teller, his voice weary and raw. $5 million from my business account." Clara turned slowly, stunned by the cruel twist of fate. There he stood again, dressed simply in a white shirt and jeans, looking thinner and older. His posture carried the weight of resignation, as though he had given up everything but his need to make amends. The teller's eyes widened. $5 million? Are you sure, sir?" "Make it 10, Alexander said firmly, his gaze locking with Clara's across the space between them. "The Sunshine Orphanage helps children who were abandoned by their fathers. Since I know what it Feels like to fail someone you're supposed to protect? Maybe my money can prevent others from suffering the way she did. Clara's chest tightened at the implication. He was honoring her, honoring the lie her mother had once told about her being adopted, by giving away the wealth that had once defined him. Alexander, she whispered without realizing. I'm not trying to buy your forgiveness. He said quickly, stepping closer as whispers rippled through the bank. People recognized them. Phones lifted to record. I'm trying to become the kind of man who deserves to exist in the same world as you. By giving away your fortune? Clara asked, anger clashing with confusion. By giving away everything that convinced me I was worth something, Alexander answered, his voice breaking. The money, the cars, the reputation, it was all meaningless. The only thing that ever mattered was your love, and I threw it away. The teller interrupted nervously. Sir, I'll need paperwork for a donation this large. Process it, Alexander ordered, his eyes never leaving Clara. And add another $5 million for the Children's Heart Foundation. Make sure it's listed in honor of Clara Whitmore's pure heart. Clara felt tears press against her eyes as she watched him dismantle his empire piece by piece, offering it all in her name. She wanted to shout at him, to tell him grand gestures, couldn't erase betrayal. Yet another part of her, buried deep and aching, felt the sincerity in his actions. You can't fix this with money, she said, her voice shaking. I know, Alexander replied softly, but I can prove that loving. You taught me what really matters. Without you, nothing has meaning. Her phone rang, slicing through the moment. Seeing her Aunt Rebecca's name on the screen, Clara seized the excuse and fled the bank. Behind her, Alexander remained standing in line, shoulders slumped but unyielding, determined to carry through with the donations. Later that night, Clara sat in her apartment surrounded by unopened letters Alexander had sent. Her phone buzzed with a new text from an unknown number. Stop running from destiny. Some meetings are written in the stars. A friend. Clara's heart pounded. Someone was watching, orchestrating, pulling strings in the shadows. And she knew exactly who had the power and cruelty to do it. Her mother. The days that followed turned into a cruel dance of coincidence, or perhaps fate's twisted design. Clara tried everything to avoid Alexander, but somehow he appeared wherever she went. At the coffee shop near her office, at the bookstore she visited every Friday, even at the quiet park where she liked to walk in the evenings, each encounter felt like a knife reopening wounds she wanted to heal. One Sunday afternoon, Clara sat on a bench beneath an oak tree, sketching quietly in her notebook to calm her restless thoughts. She looked up and her heart lurched. Alexander was across the path, sitting on a bench with a small paper bag of birdseed, feeding pigeons like an ordinary man. His eyes lifted, meeting hers, and the world seemed to still. Clara, he said gently, rising and walking toward her. His voice held exhaustion, but also a relentless determination. You need to stop following me, she said firmly, standing and clutching her notebook to her chest. I'm not following you, Alexander answered quietly. I'm trying to let the universe place me where you are. Every day I wake up and I don't know where else to go. I don't know how to exist without you. Her jaw tightened, anger pushing against the cracks in her heart. Exist without me? You should have thought of that before you betrayed me with the one person I trusted most. His shoulders sagged, but he didn't look away. You're right. I should have fought harder. I should have walked away. Instead, I let my weakness destroy everything, and I regret it every second of every day. Tears pricked Clara's eyes, but she forced them back. Regret doesn't change what happened. No, he admitted softly. But regret has changed me. Do you know where I was last night? In a mechanic's garage covered in grease helping rebuild engines because I sold the last of my dealerships. I wanted to understand what real work feels like, without assistance or luxury, without the comfort of money. For the first time in years, I was just a man earning his keep. And for the first time, I realized I was nothing without love. Nothing without you. Clara's lips trembled. She wanted to turn away, but his words burrowed into her heart. She remembered the man who once whispered poetry to her on balconies, the man who carried her shoes after long galas, the man who had kissed her forehead as though it were the most sacred place on earth. But then she remembered the wedding day, the cathedral, the humiliation, the cold truth of betrayal. Her voice hardened. You can rebuild engines, sell your empire, give away your fortune, but you can't rebuild the trust you destroyed. Alexander's voice cracked as he stepped closer. Tell me how. Tell me what I can do to earn one more chance. I'll do anything. Clara shook her head, her voice low and pained. The only thing you can do is let me heal. Stop haunting me. Stop forcing me to relive the day my world collapsed. For the first time, Alexander didn't argue. He nodded slowly, pain carving deep lines into his face. If distance is what you need, I'll give it to you. But know this, I will never stop loving you, even if I have to love you silently for the rest of my life. Clara turned away before her resolve shattered. She walked quickly down the path, tears spilling freely now, hidden from his eyes. Alexander stood beneath the oak tree, watching her disappear, his heart breaking again with each step she took. That night, Clara returned to her apartment to find another envelope slipped under her door. This one was different. Inside was no letter, but a photograph. It was her mother, Margaret, sitting with a man Clara didn't recognize, the two of them laughing together in a dimly lit bar. On the back of the photograph were the words, "She isn't finished. Be careful." Clara's pulse quickened as she clutched the photo. She realized with a chill that her mother's game wasn't over. The scandal at the wedding had only been the beginning. Margaret was still pulling strings, still orchestrating destruction, and Clara's life, already fractured, was about to be tested once again. Clara sat at her Aunt Rebecca's dining table late one evening, the photograph of her mother still clutched in her hand. The image haunted her, a reminder that Margaret's poisonous influence wasn't gone. Rebecca placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, but Clara's mind was elsewhere, spiraling between anger at her mother and the painful memories of Alexander. Across the city, Alexander sat alone at a small desk in his nearly empty penthouse. The mansion was gone, the cars were gone, the fortune was dwindling. What remained was a man stripped bare, haunted by the echo of Clara's laughter in rooms that no longer belonged to him. On the desk lay a stack of sealed envelopes, each one addressed to Clara. Letters he had written nightly, pouring his guilt and longing onto the page. Letters he never knew if she would read. One letter read, "My dearest Clara, I see you in every sunrise and hear you in every song. I am not asking for forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. I only ask that you believe me when I say I love you with a devotion that will not die even if your love for me already has." Another, "Clara, I gave away millions, I sold everything, but nothing empties the weight inside me. You once told me love meant showing up every day, not just when it's easy. I failed you when it mattered most, and that truth eats at me like fire. If I could trade my life to erase your pain, I would do it without hesitation." And another, "I saw you at the park yesterday. You walked away and I let you because I knew you needed distance. But I also saw the tears you tried to hide, and they told me something. Your heart still feels something for me. Whether it's anger or love, it means I haven't been erased. For that I am grateful." Clara never opened the envelopes herself. Sophie collected them from her doorstep, worried that reading them would break her friend's fragile progress. But one rainy night, Clara found herself alone with a letter left on her balcony, protected in a plastic sleeve. Something about the handwriting, trembling and uneven, drew her in. She tore it open and read, "Clara, tonight I stood in the rain outside your building for hours, hoping for a glimpse of you. Not because I wanted to beg, but because I wanted to feel near you even from a distance. I know you hate me. You have every reason to. But please believe this. I was weak once, and it destroyed us. I will never be weak again. Not for anyone. Not for anything. If you ever need me, For anything at all, I will come. Until my last breath, I will love you. Clara's tears fell onto the paper, smudging the ink. She clutched the letter to her chest. Torn between fury and longing, her heart divided in two. Meanwhile, Margaret watched from a distance, her sharp eyes following her daughter's every move. Sitting in the back seat of a dark car, she murmured to the man beside her, the stranger from the photograph. She's still tied to him. She can't let go. That's her weakness, and I'll use it until she finally breaks. The man smirked. And what about Hartwell? He looks half dead already. Margaret's smile curved coldly. Not dead enough. Not until he drags her down with him. Back in his penthouse, Alexander finished yet another letter, his hand shaking as exhaustion weighed on him. He stared out the window at the glittering city skyline. I'll write every day, he whispered to himself. Even if she never reads a word, she'll know I never stopped trying. Clara, in her quiet apartment, read the letter again under the dim glow of a lamp. She hated herself for the part of her heart that still beat for him, and yet as much as she tried to bury it, that part refused to die. Alexander Hartwell, once the man who commanded boardrooms and glittering galas, now spent his days in a mechanic's garage on the outskirts of the city. His hands, once manicured and used only to sign contracts worth millions, were now blistered and stained with oil. The scent of grease clung to his clothes, and sweat rolled down his back as he learned to dismantle engines and rebuild them from scratch. Hold the wrench steady, said Marcus, the shop's owner, a broad-shouldered man with a gruff voice. You don't get to be Hartwell the millionaire here. You're just Alex. Work hard or don't bother showing up. Alexander nodded without argument. He tightened the bolts with aching arms, his body adjusting slowly to the labor his money had once spared him. At night, he walked home to a modest apartment above a bakery. He slept on a simple mattress with no silk sheets, no servants, no luxury. Yet strangely, for the first time in years, he felt something close to peace. Still, the peace never lasted. At night he dreamed of Clara, her tear-stained face on the cathedral floor, her voice echoing with betrayal. He woke drenched in sweat, clutching the empty space beside him, wishing he could turn back time. One Saturday, Alexander joined Marcus and the other mechanics at a community center, where they volunteered to repair cars for struggling single mothers. A young woman approached nervously with her 2 children. Her car was old, its engine failing. Alexander knelt beside it, sleeves rolled up, and worked until his knuckles bled. When the engine finally roared to life, the woman's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. Thank you, she whispered, hugging her children. I don't know what we would have done without this. For the first time in months, Alexander smiled, not because of applause or wealth, but because he had done something good, something real. Feels better than signing $1 million contracts, doesn't it? Marcus asked with a knowing look. Alexander nodded. For the first time in my life, I think I understand what matters. Meanwhile, Clara continued her work at the design firm where she had recently been promoted. Her talent was undeniable, and her colleagues admired her resilience. But behind her professional smile, she carried the weight of everything that had happened. Some nights, when the office was empty, she opened one of Alexander's letters and read it in silence, tears falling onto the pages she pretended not to need. Rebecca noticed the quiet sadness in her niece. You still love him, she said gently one evening over tea. Clara shook her head quickly. No, I can't. He destroyed everything. But your heart doesn't lie, Rebecca replied softly. Love doesn't vanish just because someone broke it. Sometimes it lingers, waiting to see if the person who hurt you can change. Clara turned away, unwilling to admit the truth even to herself. One rainy evening, she left the office late and walked toward the train station. As she passed a narrow alley, she froze. There, crouched in the shadows, was Alexander. He wasn't drunk or disheveled. He was handing out sandwiches to homeless men, his once pristine hands now calloused, his voice gentle as he asked about their health and stories. Clara's heart clenched. This wasn't the Alexander she had known. the proud millionaire with his fleet of cars and endless charm. This was a man stripped of ego, humbling himself in service to others. She lingered in the rain, watching unnoticed, torn between admiration and pain. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She replayed the image of Alexander kneeling beside the homeless, his suit replaced by worn jeans, his arrogance replaced by compassion. He was changing, and that terrified her more than anything, because if he truly became a better man, what excuse would she have left to keep hating him? The first snow of winter fell over the city, blanketing the streets in a cold silence. Clara Whitmore walked home from the design firm, her scarf pulled tight around her neck. She paused outside a small church, its doors open, the sound of quiet music drifting into the street. Something drew her inside. The church was nearly empty, just a few candles flickering at the altar. But as she stepped down the aisle, her heart jolted. Alexander Hartwell was there, kneeling alone in the front pew. His once immaculate suit had been replaced by a simple coat, his hair slightly tousled, his face leaner and lined with humility. He didn't see her at first. His head was bowed, his hands clasped tightly. Clara froze, torn between leaving and confronting him. But then she heard his voice, low and trembling. God, I don't know if you listen to men like me. I don't know if I deserve to be here. But please, protect her. Even if she never forgives me, even if she never loves me again, let her be happy. Keep her safe from her mother's cruelty. Take everything I have left. Just don't let her suffer anymore. Clara's breath caught. He wasn't asking for himself, he wasn't begging for her love, he was pleading for her happiness. For the first time, she saw him not as the man who betrayed her, but as the broken soul who had been trapped and used by Margaret's venom. Alexander turned and saw her. His eyes widened, raw emotion spilling across his face. He stood quickly, unsure if he should approach. Clara, he whispered, her name trembling from his lips. She stepped closer, her voice steady though her heart raced. You gave up everything. The money, the cars, the empire. Why? Because none of it mattered, Alexander said, his voice breaking. I thought wealth made me powerful, but it made me weak. It blinded me. It gave your mother a weapon. I had to lose it all to see what was real. And what's real is that I love you with every breath I have. That has never changed and it never will. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Love isn't enough, Alexander. Love didn't stop you from betraying me. His voice dropped to a whisper. You're right. Love isn't enough, unless it's stronger than fear. I failed you because I was afraid. Afraid I wasn't enough, afraid of losing you, afraid of being exposed. I let fear destroy us, but I'm not afraid anymore. If you tell me to walk away right now, I'll do it. I'll disappear and never bother you again. All I need is to know that you'll be safe, that you'll be happy. The church was silent, the candles flickering as if holding their breath. Clara's tears slid down her cheeks. She wanted to turn and leave, to end the torment once and for all. But something inside her cracked open. She remembered his laughter, his devotion, the countless small ways he had once made her feel like the only woman in the world. And she remembered the letters, the donations, the grease-stained hands rebuilding engines, the man kneeling to feed the homeless. Her voice trembled. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can ever forget what happened. Alexander nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I don't ask you to forgive me today. I only ask for the chance to prove one day at a time that I can be worthy of the love I lost. If it takes the rest of my life, I'll spend it trying. Clara's heart pounded as silence stretched between them. She stepped closer, close enough to see the raw truth in his eyes. Her hand lifted as if on its own, brushing against his cheek. He closed his eyes, a tear escaping, as though her touch alone was a salvation. But before either of them could speak again, the church doors creaked open. Margaret stood there, her expression sharp, her eyes glinting with triumph. So this is where you've been hiding, Alexander? On your knees like a beggar, trying to win back the daughter I've already broken. Clara's blood ran cold. She turned to face her mother, her voice stronger than ever. "No, Mother, you didn't break me. You revealed yourself. And now—" "Everyone sees you for what you are," Margaret sneered. "You still think you can have a happy ending after everything? Look at him, reduced to nothing. He's no longer a man who can give you the world." Clara's grip tightened on Alexander's hand. Her voice rang through the church with unwavering conviction. "I don't need the world. I only need someone who will fight to deserve me. And for the first time, he's doing that." Margaret's eyes widened with rage as she realized her power was slipping. For years, she had controlled Clara with guilt and bitterness, but now her daughter was free. She turned on her heel and stormed out of the church, her footsteps echoing into the cold night. Clara and Alexander stood together in the quiet sanctuary. She looked up at him, her tears still flowing, but this time they were mixed with something else, hope. "This doesn't mean everything is fixed," she whispered, "but maybe it means we can start again. Slowly. Carefully. With honesty." Alexander nodded, his heart pounding with relief. "I'll wait as long as it takes. I'll walk any road, endure any trial, if it leads me back to you." The candles flickered warmly. The snow continued to fall outside. And for the first time since the wedding, Clara allowed herself to imagine a future not destroyed by betrayal, but rebuilt by love.